Hello again to my Cricket Creek crew. This is Mullet coming back at you. This is my standard disclosure, which you can go check out in other videos if you have questions. I'm going to add one other disclosure to this. This is going to require some math. I'm going to try and get it done in 5 minutes. We'll see what we can do with it, but we're going to go from there. So with that being said, let's jump into it. So the way that this came up this weekend, we were discussing patterns and altitudes and some other stuff between IPs, students, and various discussions. So I'm going to build the entire pattern from the ground backwards and build the gates for some numbers that you can use for rule of thumbs. Again, these numbers are my numbers and you don't have to use them, and I'll show you my triangle and math and the assumptions, and you can make your own math if you want. So the way to build it is to start with this picture right here and build it backwards. So we're going to go from the center of the airfield, I'm going to call it Frank's house, Beam Frank's house, and build it back on final approach. And if you go backwards from Frank's and you look back at the start of the pond, the very first pond that you cross as you're rolling out on final and you're approaching his house, that is approximately 1,600 feet. So we're going to use that part as a part of the triangle. The next point that we're going to use for updates is going to be the dam. If you use Google Earth again and you measure back, you can see that the front of the dam is basically at 3,000 feet. So I'm going to build some gates off of that number. And I'm going to build all these numbers and put them in and show you the math, and you can run the math yourself at that point. But I'm going to go back after this video and actually fly these numbers in the sim and validate that these numbers work and build site pictures based off of these numbers. The last site picture we're going to talk about is going to be this last one. If you go to the back of the second pond away from Frank's house and you look at that number compared to the dam, that's 3,800 feet back. So those are just some numbers that you can use going out the door to kind of hang your head on it. So let's run the math and show you exactly what we're looking at when we're running the math. So we're going to again start from short final and build it back. So if you look at this number, you go back, this is your final gate, your last chance to fix issues. It's basically like we showed on the Google Earth, the front of the first pond, which is 1,600 feet back from the touchdown zone. Looking at a glide angle of about 4.46 degrees, which is good for a glider. Powered, they usually use 3 to 2.5 degrees, depending on what kind of approach you're flying, but those are kind of standard numbers that people will use. So to build that gate, we'll use 125 feet AGL, plus the elevation of Frank's 7 November Charlie 5 of 250. That'll give you 375 feet for that gate. That's where you want to be whenever you cross that number. Building back, going to the front of the dam, if you use those numbers, that's 3,000 foot back, looking at the yardstick, and you can go back and rewind the video and look at these numbers. But we're going to continue out, and we're going to go back basically to the second dam, and that's 3,000 feet out. So instead of using a 4.46 degree glide slope, I'm going to use fighter pilot numbers because I can't fly it. Because we're going to measure everything with the micrometer, draw it with a grease pencil on a map, and then we're going to cut it with a hatchet, basically an axe. And you're not going to get close to these numbers down to that precision. So I'm going to round up to 5 degrees and call it a 5-degree glide path. So if you build that out, you're going to get 262 feet above the ground plus 250 for the elevation. So that's going to give you 512 feet on the clock. And let's say that you have energy problems and you want to know some other numbers. You could build all the way back to the back of the dam, to the second pond, to the back of the second pond dam with the second pond with the dam, build to the back of it, and that's 3,800 feet. And if you build that all the way back, keeping at a 5-degree glide path, that's 332 feet plus 250, and that's going to give you 582 feet on the clock. So that's the numbers that we're going to go out the door with. To emphasize this, if you wanted to do the other math, it's not like we can fly this number, but this is just for your information. If you run this out at 55 miles an hour, that's about 4,840 feet per minute. So if you're looking in the cockpit and you run these numbers, you're basically looking at a descent rate of 378 feet per minute, which is very benign and very easy to do. It's a very simple thing. So with that being said, we can't really measure that in our airplane because we don't have a vertical. We have a variometer, and we could kind of use that, but it's not going to be a pure number, but that can give you a good awareness as to what's going on. So with that being said, let's put this all together and use these numbers to come up with how we're going to fly this pattern and how we're going to get there. So I call this the big enchilada. So if you look at this, these are no-win numbers. The numbers on the left, the green ones, are how many feet back it is from the center of the touchdown zone. So you have 1,600 feet, 3,000 feet, and 3,800 feet. For these gates, you build them back. That means we're going to be at the front of the pond at 375 feet MSL on the altimeter, 1200 feet AGL. If you look down to the next number, you need to be at the dam at 512 on the round dials, 262 AGL. And then at the back of the second pond, you're looking at 582 feet or 332 above the ground. These numbers off to the side, if you laterally offset your base position, your downwind position, 2,500 feet, you're going to take whatever number you come up with plus 219 feet, because you're going to lose 219 feet in the turn and the distance from your downwind position to your base position, provided that you are 2,500 feet laterally offset from the runway. So running those numbers, you would basically be turning base, abeam the dam at 731 feet on the clock, or if you're going to run those numbers and meet all the rest of the criteria, at the back of the dam, you need 800 feet MSL. So you can play with these numbers in between if your pattern is not looking good. So that is the big enchilada. Those are the numbers that you need going out the door. So when I go out the door from now on, I'm going to use 350 on the clock, 500 foot on the clock, and 600 foot on the clock based on those positions. So those are the numbers. I'm sorry, it's a little bit over 5, but I'm going to fly these now. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the comments or provide your numbers down below in justification. With that being said, I'll see you in the next video.